Om Sahanavavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. We are reading from the book Meditation and Spiritual Life by Swami Yatiswarananda. We are commencing part 3, Spiritual Experience, chapter 27, From the Unreal to the Real. From the Unreal to the Real. First section, Man and Reality. All of us suffer from the threefold affliction, tapatraya, misery created by ourselves, misery caused by other beings, and misery caused by natural phenomena. In Sanskrit, these are called adhyatmika, adhibhautika, and adhidaivika. Usually all three are combined, but most often the troubles created by our own selves dominate the field of our suffering. What is the goal of life? To get rid of this threefold affliction. Everybody is constantly trying to avoid misery and bondage. But unless there's some possibility of attaining bliss and freedom, no one would have felt the urge to get rid of misery. This potentiality, this possibility, is the central fact of life. If people were fully convinced that there could be no escape, nobody would even stir. In every one of us, there is the yearning for life, for knowledge, for happiness. All of us want to live, and that consciously and happily. Thus, existence, knowledge, and bliss are the very essence of our souls, our true nature. And when we analyze the outside world too, we find the same thing standing at the back of all phenomena. Everything, living and non-living, stands before us as an object that exists, something that is. And everything has the capacity to force itself on our consciousness, possesses a sort of luminosity that shines in both the sentient and the insentient. In this, there is no difference of kind, but only of degree. As in the inside world, so also in the outside world, we find this abiding sense of existence and consciousness. Thus, not merely in ourselves, but also in all outside objects, we get a glimpse of the reality. Again, the physical objects that we see around us fulfill some of the wants of every individual. We all run after the sense objects in search of some particular sense pleasure, which we think we shall derive from the possession of that thing, whatever its nature may be. The desire for happiness is always there in us. Sense objects only draw our mind because of the idea that we are going to derive some enjoyment from them. It is because of this that we feel tempted, not because of the intrinsic value of that object. Thus we find that every external object has the capacity to exist by itself, to rouse our consciousness about it, and draw out our mind. The footnote here from the Drigdrishya Viveka, verse 20. Asti bhati priyam rupan nama chetya shapanchakam adhyatrayam brahma rupan jagadrupan tatodvayam. Asti bhati priyam rupan nama chetya shapanchakam adhyatrayam brahma rupan jagadrupan tatodvayam. However, if we analyze those external objects, we find that in the last analysis we do not know their real nature, but only their names and shapes. The reality they represent is unknown to us at present. Names and forms hide the truth in ourselves and in the outside objects. But all names and forms reflect dimly the glory of the reality at their back. This common ultimate reality, which forms the substratum of our inner life and of the outside world, is called Brahman or Atman, the Supreme Self in the Upanishads. In us, there is always a subconscious feeling of identity, a connection with this reality of Brahman. It may be very vague, very indefinite, but still it is there. The task of all spiritual life is to make this indefinite self-consciousness definite. If we really want to come face to face with truth, first we should begin with us, find out that which exists in ourselves at the back of our ego. The primary awareness of I. As long as there is a false self-identification, a false sense of personality, so long the ultimate truth can never be realized. There is in us this false identification of the self with body, mind and ego, and during the time of this identification, we see that we are shifting the center of our consciousness continually. There is such a thing as having one's consciousness rooted in the transcendental, even while working or living on the phenomenal plane. But this can never be done so long as all this wrong identification with the body and the mind lasts. Sometimes we identify ourselves with the body and say, oh, I am hurt, I feel such physical pain. Sometimes again there is the identification with the mind. Oh, so and so was awfully rude to me. I feel so worried, I feel so sorry. All this is wrong identification. But the common factor in this identification is I. Always this I that comes in different forms. And so long as this I lasts, we cannot get a glimpse of Brahman. But there's one point to note. Even at the time of this wrong identification, we have the consciousness of something, quote unquote, something that does not change. And there's a footnote here. It's from the Kena Upanishad, mantra 2.4. Prita bodha viditam. Prita bodha viditam. And it is the task of the spiritual aspirant to find out what that abiding and unchanging, quote unquote, something is. What is this I? How to know the knower? So there's a footnote here from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, mantra 2.4.14 and mantra 4.5.15. Vijñātāramare kena vijñāniyāt. Vijñātāramare kena vijñāniyāt. No thought of the finite is ever possible without the thought of the infinite, however indefinite it may be. Positing the one, we posit the other two. We cannot formulate the infinite. We cannot have an idea of pure consciousness that is Brahman. But although it can never be formulated, it can be intuitively realized. There is such a thing as direct, superconscious experience. The truth can be realized by him whom it chooses and to whom it reveals itself. This is from the Kathopanishad, mantra 1.2.23 and Mundaka Upanishad, mantra 3.2.3. From the monastic standpoint, we are your own chooser because from the monastic standpoint, you are your own chooser because this self, this truth is not something distinct from you. And if you choose yourself to be the knower of this truth and really strive for that, you become that. From the monastic standpoint, spiritual realization is self-realization. From the dualistic point of view, God is the chooser. God's grace comes to those whom he chooses. But even here, the problem of self persists. God's grace comes only to those who are ready for it, who have struggled hard for purity. Even in the case of the so-called sinners who are suddenly converted to holy life, their very sinning gives them the knowledge of the workings of their lower mind. In them, There is an unconscious but intense struggle for purity. From the dualistic point of view, spiritual realization means God realization. From the Advaitic standpoint, self-realization and God realization mean one and the same. In the dualistic schools, a distinction is made between these two. First comes self-realization and then comes God realization. But in both paths, it is essential to transcend the ego consciousness and discover the soul. Spiritual life proper begins only with the discovery of the soul. Be bold and face the truth. This is from Swami Vivekananda to the Awakened India. The complete works of Swami Vivekananda, published in 1966, volume 4, page 387. There must be a merciless self-analysis. First of all, try to find and regain your own soul. Your soul is practically lost to it. And only after you have found it again can the question of this higher realization arise. Spiritual life begins with man's search for his own soul. Spiritual life begins with the recognition of the fact that we are neither bodies nor masses of emotions, neither men nor women, but are spiritual entities, parts of a vast spiritual principle which is more real and infinitely more valuable than the physical world. But it is necessary to have this awareness as the very basis of all our striving. The fundamental laws of spiritual life. There are two important laws governing the relationship between the self and the cosmos. The first law is, whatever one takes to be real draws one's whole being, one's thoughts, one's feelings, one's will. If this unreal world appears to us as real, then it draws our whole being. If the divine appears to us as real, then we turn away from the world and set our whole heart on the divine. When we take the world to be real, we are full of it. When we take the divine to be real, we are full of the divine alone. So whatever has become a reality to us, that we follow with our whole heart. It is therefore necessary for us to inquire into the nature of reality. And when we make this inquiry, we discover another fact, the second fundamental law of spiritual life, that our concept of the reality depends upon our concept of ourselves. So the first law of spirituality is, whatever one takes to be real draws one's whole being, one's thoughts, one's feelings, one's will. And the second law of spirituality, of spiritual life, is that our concept of the reality depends upon our concept of ourselves. For a child, its dolls are real living beings. As it grows older, its concept of itself changes, and hence the dolls lose their reality. Similarly, adolescence, youth, and old age bring about changes in man's concept of the external world. There is a close connection between our knowledge of ourselves and our outlook on life. Subjective change always precedes our knowledge of the objective world. The well-known story of the king who had an attack of some illness which affected his eyes illustrates this point. Doctors advised the king to look always at green-colored things. The king ordered the whole palace, orchard, etc. to be painted green. But the wise minister suggested wearing of green spectacles instead. Then the king saw the whole world as green. Spiritual life begins only when our concept of ourselves changes and we begin to look upon ourselves as souls. When we look upon ourselves as spirit, we seek the infinite spirit. Whenever the physical world becomes more real than the spiritual world, our body has already become more real than our soul and our consciousness. As a matter of fact, there is first of all a fall in our consciousness, and then we become more conscious of the physical body and then of the external world. Next section, basis of reasoning. Verification through direct experience is the basis of reasoning in Vedanta. It is not mere intellectualism or logic chopping. Reasoning is always based on experience. Reasoning begins with the incontrovertible fact of the existence of self in us. Descartes said, cogito ergo sum, I think, so I exist. The Hindu would reverse the sentence, I exist, so I think. This reasoning is extended to the physical world around us and the mental world within us. We then find that the self alone is the one unchanging reality, while everything else is impermanent. That which is changing must be unreal, or at least less real than that which always persists in all the three states of waking, dream, and deep sleep. This is how a Vedantic aspirant discriminates between the real and the unreal. There must be a clear analysis. We can even stand apart from our thoughts and watch them. We can watch our mind. So the mind is an object that can be watched by some other object. The form is perceived and the I is its perceiver. It, that is the I, is perceived and the mind is its perceiver. The mind with its modifications is perceived and the witness, that is the self, is verily the perceiver. But it, that is the witness, is not perceived by anything else. This is from the Drigdrishya Viveka, mantra 1. Rupan drishyalochanam drak tadrishyam drak driktu manasam drishyadivrittaya sakshi Drigevana tu drishyate. Again, Rupan drishyalochanam drik tadrishyam driktu manasam drishyadhivritataya sakshi Drigevana tu drishyate. And just to repeat the meaning, the form is perceived and the I is its perceiver. It, the I, is perceived and the mind is its perceiver. The mind with its modifications is perceived and the witness, the self, is verily the perceiver. But it, that is the witness, is not perceived by anything else. This is the way self-analysis, inquiry into our real nature is conducted. By this we get a glimpse of the soul, the subject, that witnesses the object. But the highest truth is beyond both the subject and the object. When you are very reflective, you say to yourself, oh, this thought arises in my mind, etc. So you become the witness of even your thought. The mind is composed of so many thoughts rising and disappearing. Hence the mind is constantly changing. But the witness, the self, does not change. All human search for the real must begin with this unchanging self. The principle of self-consciousness is the very basis of our personality. In the midst of all physical and mental changes, there is in us some unchanging principle, and this gives us the clue to attaining the ultimate reality. That which is real in our consciousness ever continues to be. If the bubble disappears, the water particle does not disappear. The body is the bubble, the self is the water drop. That which is the true essence in us ever remains. That which is not real from the absolute standpoint drops off. The body drops off, the self remains immutable, eternal. Our concept of ourselves has an important bearing on our activities. Suppose we look upon ourselves as the body, then bodily enjoyment becomes the goal of our life. And suppose we come to think that the soul persists after death and that our future life will wholly depend on our present activity, physical as well as mental, what would be our attitude then? Then we would act in a different way, because everything is not going to be over with death. We would then try to seek that which brings fulfillment, peace, and blessedness to our souls. So our attitude makes a good deal of difference as far as our daily conduct and thinking are concerned. Through discrimination, we must cultivate the right attitude. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.